This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Let's begin. We'll dedicate the shir here to the Leili Nishmas Gittel Bas Moshe, and this coming Wednesday is the yahrzeit of my father-in-law, whose name was Reb Shabsi ben Reb Chaim, and his father, the same day, Chaim ben David Doiv. Tei nafsham tzrura b'tzera Chaim. They should be good debaters for all of us. Amen. So let me tell you what the points of departure are, and then we'll come back and put the puzzle together. Anshe Sodom, right? They go down in history as being a rather unpopular bunch, an unpopular chevra, the people of Sodom. And their destruction comes about with Aish and Gofris, with fire and sulfur. It's just an odd form of punishment. It's referred to later on in Devarim when Hashem says there'll be a punishment of Gofris for Melech Srei for Kol Haaretz. And there's something about this form of punishment, fire, being the undoing of Sodom. Yesterday I raised the issue of the terminology, the interesting verbiage that's used, that the Malachim are referred to as the Mashchisim, the destroyers of Sodom. But then the Torah goes into numerous times that it talks about the overturning, Hafichas Sodom. What's up with the Hafich? You have this picture of like an inversion, like it's on like a hinge, and Hashem flips it over. Well, how is that consistent with the fire? Either it was destroyed or it was overturned. Which one happened? And to throw a few other points out here at the beginning, what's up with this thing with Lot's wife, where they're instructed not to look back, and she does look back, and she becomes a Netziv Melech. She becomes a pillar of salt. It's kind of an odd thing to become. How many people do you know that have become pillars of salt? And just the whole succession of events in the Parshas is odd. So let's go back to what happens when the destruction of Sodom is about to take place, and Perik Yud Ches Pasuk Yud Zayin v'Hashem Omar. Hashem says, can I conceal from Avram what I'm going to do? He's going to be a great nation. All the nations of the world are going to be blessed with him. I got to tell him about this Sodom thing. What's going on here? Why does Avram care? Obviously Lot is there, but that's not the reason Hashem gives. Hashem gives a different reason. Hashem says I got to tell him about it because he's going to be a great nation, not because his nephew's there. So what? Can I conceal this from Avram? Avram is going to be a great nation. And then Avram pleads. That's a whole exercise of futility, occupies like a whole bunch of psukim in the Torah for naught. What's going on here? So let's put that in the back of your minds, and let's delve into a little bit of the war with the Yetzer Hara. Because somebody told me that people are still battling with him. The Torah tells us that Avram, by the akeida, Avram got up early in the morning and he saddled his donkey. The Tzroyer HaMoyer, or an early source, says, Yafa Amru Abisenu. The rabbis told us beautifully that from the day the world was created, no one saddled their donkey until Avram Avinu came along and saddled his donkey. So the Tzur Amar and the other commentaries say, well, how'd they ride donkeys until then? What does that mean, no one? And are we supposed to be impressed? Is this another one of the great accomplishments of Avram Avinu, that he was a donkey settler. Like, why do we care? Then the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, again one of the Svarim of Chazal, tell us that on the third day Avram lifted his eyes and he saw the place from a distance. Says the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, what did he see? He saw a pillar of fire that went from earth to heaven. Got an image, right? He's standing traveling along, all of a sudden he sees a pillar of fire. Now, the Rebbeinu Shalom is all into special effects, but he doesn't make miracles for naught, and there's clearly a reason that this was the method. He could have had one of those little airplanes circling with a banner on the back of it, with an advertisement saying akeida below or something. That didn't have to be a pillar of fire, right? What's more, the Torah says about Avraham Avinu that he took in his hand the fire and the knife. Now, Rabbi Yitzchak of Radvil, it was one of our ancestors, the Remechel Zlotchev's son, says, how do you take fire in your hand? These kinds of questions really bother me, the kinds of things that are really obvious and you never paid attention to. They didn't have Bic lighters. So what does it mean he carried the fire? How does a person carry fire in their hands? Did it mean flintstones, which I assume was the method that they made fires in those days? What was it that he carried in his hands? Okay, so the Medrash tells us, we all learned this in Cheder, that is for the few of us that went to Cheder, count me out, that on the way to the akeida, that the Yetzer Hara became infuriated with the determination of Avram and Yitzchak, and he placed all kinds of stumbling blocks in their way. He caused forests to grow, the mountains to appear, and when they were not impressed with any of the impediments that he threw in their way, the Yetzer Hara created a river, a nahar. And Avraham Avinu and Yitzchak crossed the river, and Avraham Avinu came up to his nose in the water. It's a Maimar Chazal. This isn't the little Medrash says. This is the real thing. And when it came to that point, and Avraham Avinu wasn't stopping, then the river dried up, and he was able to continue on his way to the akeida. So the question is, why was this the ultimate trick that the Yetzer Hara pulled out? The river trick. Why is that the last trick that he pulls out? Now, in Shulchan Aruch, right at the beginning, it says that a person is supposed to say the Parsha of the akeida every day. And the Beis Yosef writes, the Shloach Kodesh brings it, that the reason is that we are to derive from the akeida instructions on inspiration as to how to give our lives over to do the will of Hashem. The Ahavas Shalom, the Baba Verov here quotes that the Ahavas Shalom writes, Vayivake atzei oila. Atzei means wood. Atzei also means eitzos. That Avraham Avinu provided us with advice on how to elevate ourselves. Vayivake atzei oila. That the akeida provides advice and solutions on how a Jew can become elevated in his service of Hashem. Now, one of the akeidus, one of the issues that we always talk about and can never talk about enough, is the attitude that we bring to our service of Hashem. It's interesting, I had a conversation with the TAM students last week about this. As to why is it not adequate just to do what we have to do? Why is it necessary to bring anything else to the fore? Just do what it says in Shulchan Aruch you got to do, and do the obligatory. So, what we talked about then, and what we'll talk about now, is that the attitude that one brings to their service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is really where the action is, to the degree that the Zohar HaKadosh says that mitzvahs that are done without passion, without love, without fear, without awe, like Parchas Vayeira, they don't really hit their mark. There's ways of reclaiming that and elevating that, but that's really the goal, is to sense a sense of privilege about the fact that we have the ability to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The great Maggid, Rebbe Ber, taught as follows. He said, we say this each day in Karbonis, Tzav armes banav le'emer zois teiras ha'olah, hi ha'olah al moikta. And what he taught was that our job, it's interesting that he doesn't mention this, but there's a Maimon Chazal that says that even though fire descended from heaven, mitzvah l'havim min ha'hedit. You can't rely on heavenly fires. You got to there's a mitzvah for the kohen to instigate the lighting of the fire himself. You got to kindle the fire here before the heavenly fire descends. We have to light the fires. And Rashi's comment there is that the reason the Torah says tzavis armes bonav, there's a language of commandment, is because it requires ziruz miyad l'daris. The carbon oila was completely consumed by the Mizbeach. There was no meat, there was no skin, there was no hides, everything was consumed by the Mizbeach, and therefore it required special attention. Miyad l'daris. What he's saying is, that the Maggid taught, is that this aspect of the moikta, of the fire, of lighting the passion behind our mitzvahs, is something that's going to be relevant for all generations. And as that parsha concludes, Eish tamid tukad ala mizbeach le'sichbed, there's got to be a constant fire. We cannot allow it to be extinguished. The Shloah Kodesh quotes from the Ramak, and it's almost a humorous thing. The Ramak, Ramosha Kadavera, writes that he heard from an old man that if a person is overcome by extraneous, distracting thoughts, that they should recite this pasuk. Eish tamid tukad ala mizbeach le'sichba. A constant fire should be burning on the altar. It shall not be extinguished. And the Shloah Kodesh writes that it's clear as day to him that old man was Eliyahu Navi, but that the Ramak did not want to write that he had Gili Eliyahu, so he wrote that he heard it from an old man. Eliyahu Navi is certainly an old man. He's several thousand years old.
So what do you say if a person's on the
So a person is distracted, he's having trouble focusing, or he has evil thoughts, he should recite the pasuk Eish tamid tukad ala mizbeach le'sichbeh. The Baal Shem Tov says that saying it isn't enough. It's not about just saying the words, but that the idea is to motivate oneself to recognize that we got to get into the passion of it. We have to light the flame. And by warming ourselves to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then we can hope that the fire, that the flames, that the passion, that the interest, the excitement of serving Hashem will overcome and banish the other interests of the Yetzer Hara. So, if you will, there are two burning flames going here, and our job is to see to it that we can take the passion of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu and use that passion to get rid of the passion that's going on in the wrong areas. Here's a little bit of a strange thing, but it's an important point to where we're going. Rabbi Yonis Naibeshitz in Yaris Devash quotes a strange halacha. He says that the halacha is that one should make the bracha. They used to, before they invented sliced bread, breads used to come whole. So if you're going to say a bracha on a whole bread, you should say a bracha, to Gemara in Sanhedrin, on the place that the baking began, wherever the darkest spot is on the bread. This is, those who are fans of a crusty bread know that that's the place where the heat was obviously the warmest, because that's why it developed the crust. Now, writes Rabbi Yonis Naibeshitz that fire overcomes the poison of the nachash. Okay? Why? So he says, what was the curse that the nachash received? The curse was that his food is going to be afar. He's going to eat dirt. Fire and dirt are opposites. Fire rises, and dirt, earth, drops. Therefore, the nachash and fire are antithetical to one another. So he brings a raya lahalacha. There's a whole bunch of foods that you're not allowed to leave out overnight. Constantly get shilas about this. Oy vey, I left eggs out, or I left this out. You always get shilas about it. So one of the things you don't have to worry about is barbecued roasted meat. You left your roasted meat out overnight, it for sure has food poisoning, but it does not have snake poisoning, because due to the fact that it was scorched by fire, the snake has no shaykhs to it. That's what Rabbi Yonis Naibeshitz brings as a proof to the fact that that which has been singed by the fire is not subject to the poison of the snake. And therefore a person should make a bracha on that spot, because that's a place where there's blessing, because the snake doesn't have access to that spot on the bread. So people who like the edges of the bread are obviously people who have overcome the poison of the nachash. Now, I want to take this a step further, this thought of Rabbi Yonis Naibeshitz. What the Bav V'Ruv does with this Rabbi Yonis Naibeshitz, is that he points out that the power to overcome the nachash is with passion. Okay, so if a person can ignite the passion in Avodas Hashem, they have the ability to battle that which the snake instilled, the poison of the snake. But let's go back to his earliest appearance. Right? The first movie that the Nachash did was back in Bereshis. What does it say there? So Chazal tell us that when did the Nachash get involved? Right? So we only read about his involvement with the fruit. But there's, as Julius used to say, there's a story behind. He saw Adam and Chava being intimate with one another, and he was jealous. So he decided that he was going to kill Adam and he was going to take Chava. That's the grand plan. What I believe, based upon this Rabbi Yonis Naibeshitz, is that the Nachash understood when he saw man being able to operate in the world of taiva, the world of appetite, and do so in Kedusha, that made the Nachash crazy. The Nachash said, okay, I can handle a guy who's davening. Okay, that I'll deal with that. But somebody who comes and wants to take something which involves the passion, that which the world views as the lowest of the low, and they're doing this b'kedusha, That the Nachash couldn't handle. Then he had to lay claim to. And he continues to battle in that arena to this very day. What's his methodology? His methodology is what it says about Amalek. What did Amalek come and do? Amalek introduced the freezer. Chill. Right? It's not so great. It's not so big. It's not such a big deal. Mitzvahs are not so great. Torah is not so great. Davening is not so great. Everybody relax. Take it slow. Come late. Leave early. We all know the script, right? That's Amalek. Karcha b'derech. He brought Karirus into the picture. The opposite of the undoing of the Nachash, which is igniting the flame, comes Amalek and turns on the freezer. Now, when it came to the akeida, so let's go back a step to Avram Avinu's discovery of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Brings here in Divrei Shleima that the Medrash, we all know the Medrash, the famous Medrash, that Avram was traveling mimakim lamakim. Says the Medrash, Lech lecha mi'artzecha mashal, it's a parable to a person who is traveling from one place to another. Ve'ra bira achaz delekes, and he saw a bira is a palace. Delekes can be interpreted in two ways. Delekes could mean lit up. That's how most translations translate delekes. But delekes really means on fire. He saw a palace on fire. And he said, can it be that this palace has no manik? Hitzitzala balabira, so the owner of the palace sticks his head out and says, no, it's mine. I am the balabira. And I always had the question, okay, how about putting out the fire? He sticks his head out and says, it's mine. Well, okay, it's time to call the fire department. So too, says the Medrash, Avraham Avinu said, can it be that the world has no operator? When he said that, Hitzitzala b'Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem looked at him and said, I am the master of the world. So everybody comments on this Medrash. What was Avram? What do you need this mashal for? What's it telling you? And the way he interprets this Medrash is that he uses a pasuk, a teaching from the Baal Shem HaKadosh, a very famous pasuk in Tehillim. It says, Tehillim 92, Kine Eivecha Hashem, Kine Eivecha Yovedu. Behold your enemies, Hashem, behold your enemies will be destroyed. So the Baal Shem HaKadosh said that a person looks out at the appetites of the world, and it appears on the surface that we're surrounded by enemies of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everywhere we turn, there's appetite and taiva and distraction. And it's very troubling because it looks like we're doomed. Says the Baal Shem HaKadosh, the minute a person recognizes that it just can't be that way, but that in truth, within all things, there is a spark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that waits for us to recognize it, at that moment, the evil component of whatever it is departs. He says, Kihine Eivecha, when a person looks out and sees that everything looks like it's the enemy, Hashem, but he says it can't be that way. There has to be, the Rebbeinu Shalom has to be in there. Then Kihine Eivecha Yevedu, says the Baal Shem HaKadosh, then the enemy of it departs. It disappears. When Avraham Avinu, he says, looked out at the world and saw a world on fire, He saw Bira Delekes. He saw a world that was engulfed in passion and distraction and all kinds of evil appetites. And he said, can it be this very question? Can it be that the world has no operator? Can it be that this Bira, that this palace is a flame and there's nothing behind it? To which HaKadosh Baruch Hu responded, Ani Bala Bira. And then you don't have to call the fire department, because the very recognition of the fact that it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu that's offering all of these things to us for us to serve Him, utilizing the world, then the enemy departs. For Avraham Avinu, this was a tremendous departure from his upbringing, the world of terach, the world of idolatry, where it was all, the crass and the physical was all so antithetical to what they called spirituality. So for him, this was a tremendous leap of distinction in practice. So what does Avraham Avinu throw himself into? Interestingly, unlike Shem ben Noach, who was a spiritual guru, who was a Rosh Yeshiva who sat and learned, Avraham Avinu was in the kitchen. Avraham Avinu decided that he was going to take this and utilize it to be Makar of the world to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He was going to use the physical world, this novelty, this new approach that the Baal Shem HaKadosh introduced was going to become Avraham Avinu's passion, and he was going to use this to serve Hashem. He opened up this massive eshel, in which he brought people in and had them say brachas and introduced them to the physical world and how one can serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as my brother said yesterday, that became the key to Klal Yisrael's being able to receive the Torah on Har Sinai. When Avram Avinu was going to the akeida, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu calls upon him, Chazal tell us that his fear was, they ask on Vayevake Atza'ela, why did he split the wood before he left home? That's very impractical. It's much harder to carry that way. Take one big log and split it when you get to your destination. Right? So Chazal tell us that Avraham Avinu was engulfed in passion when the Rebbe gave him this mitzvah, and he was afraid that the mitzvah would dissipate. So Avraham Avinu learned the Ramban, and the Ramban says that when a person has a Yisrael, do something, capture the moment. Do something to hold on to it. So he split the wood right away to start the mitzvah. Hold on to the fire. And therefore the Torah testifies that he had in his hand the fire. It doesn't mean his hands were, that there was something burning in his hands. But he had in his hands, he had the fire to the degree where Yitzchak said to him, Hinei ha'esh v'a'itzim, behold, Father, you have the fire. I can see that you have the fire. How do I know? Says the name of the Melech. V'a'itzim, because I can see that you split the wood. So I know that you have the passion, you're holding on to the passion. So when HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to show Avraham Avinu where the action is going to take place, he comes to him in a pillar of fire, says the Pirkei Rebbe Eliezer. He saw the place from a distance. What did he see? He saw a pillar of fire that went from the mountain all the way to heaven. That's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicated to him where the action was. Again, a fascinating halacha. The halacha says that if somebody has a donkey, that you're allowed to put a saddle on a donkey on Shabbos in order to warm it, because there is, the Amri Inche says the Gemara in Shabbos, Chamra afili b'tkufas Tammuz kurirla. A donkey, even in the midst of the hottest summer days, a donkey is cold. I don't know. I didn't Google it. But that's what the Gemara says. Donkeys are cold. And therefore you're allowed to put the mardas, the saddle on the donkey to warm it up. Chum Chazal and tell us that until Avraham Avinu came, when he got up that morning, and he took it and saddled his donkey, that no one had ever saddled a donkey, meaning that up until that point, no one had ever realized that the way for us to battle our Yetzer Hara is by igniting the fire of a mitzvah. We have to fight the fire with fire. If we want to battle evil, we have to saddle the donkey. You got to get rid of the Karirus. You got to get rid of what Amalek wanted to do. He wanted to chill mitzvahs. We have to reignite the fires and the passion and the excitement of our mitzvahs if we want to be able to battle evil. When Avraham Avinu comes back from this original trip, right? So they're leaving their place of idolatry and they come, and light goes with him. And it comes to a point where the Torah tells us that the Roye Light and the Roye Avraham are not getting on. And they got to split. And this maybe is a little bit too psychological, but too bad. Light is having trouble living with Avraham Avinu. He can't measure up. He sees that Avraham Avinu was introduced to this incredible new idea of serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the passion and the fire, and even in the world of the physical. And Light's not handling this well. And his people and Avraham Avinu's people are getting into constant conflict. So Avraham Avinu says to him, you know what, Light? We need to separate, we need to part ways. Because your being in my company is not motivating you to good, quite the contrary. All you are seeing is how you're not measuring up. You need to go out on your own. If I go to the right, you go to the left. If I go to the left, you go to the right. And Lot looks out and he chooses a place. Vayaras kol kikar yad, and he sees a lush, magnificent place. And he chooses this place. He's going to make a go for it. Light's going to go and try. And he goes. The Torah says, Avraham Avinu dwells in Canaan, and Lot goes ba'orei hakikar vayehal ad Siddim. And then the Torah tells us, va'anshei Siddim roim v'chatoim l'Hashem. These people of Siddim were terrible sinners. And Lot loved it. Because Lot was now the tzaddik hador. Being among, and Rashi points this out. Rashi points it out in this week's Parsha, that when Lot was invited to come back and dwell with Avraham Avinu, he said, no, I don't want to be with you. I don't want to be in his presence, because where I'm at now, I'm a great guy. And going back to Avraham, I'm going to have to measure up to Avraham, and I look terrible in his presence. There's another person who has Light's attitude. My father said this years ago about Hagar. Hagar could not stand being in Sarah's company. And the Torah tells us that Sarah has words with Avram, but take L'Griyat Beina, that she begins to abuse Sarah, and she says really nasty things, and Sarah comes to Avram with complaints, and the way my father interpreted it was that Avram and Sarah kept their greatness under wraps. And when Hagar began to abuse Sarah, Sarah went to Avram and said, this method is not working. We need to show who we really are. And they took off the concealment, and Hagar ran for her life. Vataneo Sarah, and Sarah afflicted her. Sarah didn't do anything. She didn't pick up a broom to beat her. She didn't do anything to hurt her. All she did was show her who she really was. And that is one of the worst forms of affliction. And when the Malach meets her and he says to her, tell me, Hagar, where are you coming from and where are you going? All Hagar can respond is, Mipnei Sarah Gvirti Anochi Barachas, I am running from Sarah. She doesn't know where to go. But she cannot live in Sarah's company. Says the Malach to her, go back, V'hisani Tachas Yadeh, and suffer. If you want to become something in life, then dwell among people who are greater than you, not people who are lesser than you. And if you don't change your attitude, he also says to her, I want to tell you what's going to happen. You're going to have a kid and he's going to be a para Adam, he's going to be a wild Indian. And he's going to destroy civilization. Because people who can't recognize greatness, people who need to compare themselves to others and be better than them, are going to destroy the world. And Hagar goes back. Now, Hashem comes to Avram, and the situation with Sodom becomes intolerable. So Hashem comes to Avram and says to Avram, Hashem says, Avram, can I conceal from Avram what's going to happen? If Avram, he's going to be this great nation. What's happening here? The Rebbeinu Shalom is saying to us in the Torah that the people of Sodom are making a choice. Yes, they are people of tremendous appetites. They're battling really nasty forms of Yetzer Hara. And they're alive and well in today's world. Most of them hold political office. I can't conceal from Avram what I'm going to do here, because the way a Jew responds to this is going to be very different from how the nations of the world respond. A Jew is going to look into a world of Sodom and look for the opportunities, as the Baal Shem HaKadosh taught, Ki ne'evecha Hashem, somewhere under that pile of dung, there's a spark that I can use to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When Hashem comes and to Avram Avinu and says to Avram Avinu, I got to get rid of this place, Avram Avinu says, wait Hashem, maybe there are some good people there. Maybe there's someone who does get it. Maybe in Sodom there are 50 good people who are utilizing the very temptations of Sodom and are using it for the right reasons. Hashem said there are no 50. 45, it's not 45. 40, 30, 20, 10. Is there anybody who gets it? The HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, nobody gets it. The whole place missed the boat. And simultaneously, the two things that take place. Sodom is destroyed by its own fire. By the Eish and by the Gofris. And at the same time, we are called upon to be Mahapech Sodom. While Sodom is destroyed internally by its own appetites and its own fires, the Jew is called upon to take those same appetites and to transform them into something that we can utilize to serve Hashem. So there's simultaneously both of these things going on. There's the hashchasa of Sodom, there's the destruction of Sodom as it is unto itself. A society that cannot control its appetites will self-destruct. And we're watching it happen in front of our own eyes. And at the same time, a Jew has to be able to recognize that there's something in there that they can take and be mahapech, that we can transform and turn into an opportunity for growth. There's many ways that we can understand now how when the angels come to Sodom, how light reacts and what he offers, and all that. There's many different components fall into place. When Yitzchak is born, and Sarah Imenu observes Yishmael mitzachek, what are Sarah's words to Avraham Avinu? She says, "Garesh ben ha'ama hazos." Get rid of the son of that maidservant. Who is the problem? The Torah says that Yishmael was mitzachik. The Yishmael was idolatry and adultery and murder. So get rid of the kid. She can't even utter his name. But Garesh ben ha'am hazos. The Torah is telling us where this comes from. The Torah is pointing to the fact that Yishmael was Yishmael because his mother was a Mitzri. And the Mitzri were Shtufei Zima. They were people who could not control their appetites. And as a result, as we learned in last week's Parsha, she was an angry, resentful person about being in the company of great people. And what resulted was exactly what Hashem said would happen. So when Sarah Imenu points out to Avram he's got to get rid of Yishmael, it was a package. I don't want him because this is what his mother is bringing to the table. And interestingly, how does Yishmael, when they go out into the desert, what happens to Yishmael? He's overcome by an illness which Rashi tells us was a burning fever. He was consumed by the fire. And only by a heavenly miracle was the water came along. So when Avraham Avinu is going to the akeida, and the Yetzer Hara tries every trick on him, the ultimate trick is that he throws a river in his way. He's got to cool down that passion. He has to chill Avraham Avinu's fire. He fails. Avraham Avinu overcomes the river. Lot is struggling in Sodom. He leaves Avram's company thinking that by comparison he's going to become a better person. If only he goes and dwells among the lowlifes of society, he'll shine. That doesn't work out so great. Nonetheless, in the merit of Avram, Lot is saved. But the Malach turns to both of them and says to them, going forward, Al tabet achrecha. Don't look behind you. There was a disaster. It won't. Your choice of how to deal with your inadequacy is not going to work. It's not going to work if you're living in your past. It's not going to work if you're living by comparison. And Lot's wife looks behind her, and she becomes a Nitziv Melach. She becomes a statue of salt. Because someone who is either stuck in their past, or the only way that they find any value is by comparing themselves to the wicked people around them, is a statue. They're not going anywhere. There's nothing productive coming forth. She turned herself into a statue by not being willing to look forward, to look. And it's interesting that when we're talking about light, he wants to go to a place, okay, so send me to a place that have lesser Aveiros. And then from there he says, I want to go up into the mountains. He is looking up towards something. And ultimately, that episode leads, strangely enough, to the birth of David HaMelech and Mashiach, because there was some element of Lot's being willing to look at things differently. To look at, perhaps there is something in the future. Perhaps there is something here that I can ignite that will be different. But if you look at the language of the pasuk, it's in pasuk 26 here. After he's saved here, look at this. It was here this morning. Oh, here it is, pasuk 29. When Hashem destroyed these cities, Vayizker the kimis Avram, and Hashem remembered Avram. Vayishalach es Lot, and he sent out Lot mitoich ha'afecha, from the midst of, I don't even know how to translate this, ha'afecha, the upside down, the turnover, the upheaval. Ba'afeich es ha'orem asher yoshev behen Lot, when Hashem turned over the cities that Lot dwelled in. What was the key to Lot's unique survival? Was the concept of being able to be mahapech something. While everything else was destroyed around him, what saved Lot was that he was saved mitoich ha'afecha. He was saved from the midst of a momentary recognition that somewhere in here is a spark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I'm able to take this and transform it and use it to serve Hashem. Is Vayal Lot had an aliyah. Lot had, somehow he was uplifted by it. So Lot becomes the father, the grandfather of Geula, of all future redemption. It has to come at Teich HaFecha, and you always find these sordid, strange seeds of light with Rus, with Yehuda and Tamar, with David HaMelech, and ultimately with Mashiach. Because finding light in that which is already light is not the challenge. The challenge is to take a world of Sodom and to look for the light beneath the surface of the corrupt world of Sodom. So, while it's so discouraging to see a world that is degenerating in front of our eyes, Klal Yisrael's mission to the world is not to join the pack and to degenerate along with them, but to recognize that we have a mission to the destiny of the world of Al Tabet Achrecha. Don't look back. Look forward. Look towards that which we can transform and turn into a point of light. Ba'afeich es ha'arim. When that was that moment of recognition, there's a Mishnah that says it's better to be a tail for a lion than to be a head of a fox. And it's not always comfortable to be in the company of great people. But it's that very discomfort that allows the light to emerge from within and to turn us into something productive and allow the Geula to emerge. So the lessons of the akeida that the Shulchan Aruch says that we're supposed to derive Vayivake atze oila, that we can split the eitzis of elevation, of how to elevate ourselves, comes from Avraham Avinu's recognition that, as difficult as it was to banish Hagar and to banish Yishmael, and even more so to undertake the akeida, that ultimately the vision of that fire that went from earth to heaven was what carried Avraham Avinu to recognize, that motivated him to recognize that our very actions are the ones that are going to bring Mashiach. I've shared with you in the past that there's in the Maimarim Aketzarim from the Balatanya, he writes, I'll tell you where it is, it's on Parshas, the Parsha of the Benzion Twerski. If a person will have two children, one from a beloved wife and one from a hated wife, and he's not allowed to take the child of the beloved wife and make him the Bechor over the Ben Asnua. So the Balatanya writes there that there are two stages in history. There are the Ben Ahuva, there are people who are in a loving relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom. They're on fire. And everybody thinks that it's because of them that the Geula will come. He says it's not true. The proof is that those generations existed already and Mashiach didn't come. Mashiach is going to come because of the Ben Asnua, because of the people who are not in the mood of doing the mitzvahs, who force themselves to go ahead and do it. And it's because of those people, it's because of us, that generation that precedes Mashiach, that has no geschmack. I don't know if I told you this last week, but if I did, it's worthwhile repeating. The Heilige Gerishner said that it says, if earlier generations im rishonim kemalachim, if the earlier generations were like angels, anu k'bnei adam, then we can be humans. If the earlier generations were humans, then we are like donkeys. So generally it's seen as a big put down, right, about us. So he says, imagine, he says, if you come into a room and there's a Yid standing Shemoneh Esrei, davening Shemoneh Esrei, wearing his talis and tefillin and shuckling away in great fervor. So it's nice to watch, but it's not like earth-shattering. It's not something completely novel. So imagine walking into the stable, and there's a donkey wearing talis and tefillin and shuckling back and forth and davening Shemoneh Esrei. You'd call the news, right? That's something novel. So says the Rishna that our generation are like donkeys, and we put on our talis and tefillin, we daven Shemoneh Esrei, and we do our mitzvahs, and the Rebbeinu Shalom calls the news. He calls the malachim upstairs, says, come, you got to get a glimpse of this. There are people who, despite the fact that they're not into it at all, they're not feeling anything, and there's no passion there, and despite that, they're doing it. I think it's time for Mashiach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.